On this special episode of The M Word, we're talking about Superbowl ads. The good, the bad, and the boring. Today's distinguished panel of marketing experts is comprised of Maritza Lizama from Captiva Branding, Andy Janitis from PPC Pitbulls, and Jen Bagos from Arlington Strategy. From Dunk Kings to Dove, we recap this year's ads and dive deep into the themes and messages in the most expensive ads of the year. All right. Welcome to the M Word. This is a special episode where we, this esteemed panel, are going to talk about the good, the bad, and the boring from Super Bowl 2024. I am your host, Jennifer Mulchandani. I am the founder and CEO at Arlington Strategy. I am a proud boyfriend of Taylor Swift, football fan, but don't really follow football. So let me introduce this great panel that we have here today. And as I go around, I'm going to ask our panelists to just quickly shorthand your favorite ad, and then we're going to come back and dissect it all in a couple of minutes. So let me start with Maritza Lizama. She is the co-founder and CMO from Captiva Branding. Maritza, what was your favorite ad?
Hello. And my little flamingo is here to say hello as well. I am so excited to be part of this conversation. My favorite ad was, believe it or not, the NFL character playbook, where the little boy was running through and he had a dream of becoming a pro football player. It was quite touching. It wasn't forced, and it pulled at my heartstrings. It was a really moving ad.
That is fantastic. Next up, Andy Janitis, the founder and lead strategist at PPC Pitbulls. Welcome, Andy. What was your favorite ad?
Thanks for having me. I gotta say, maybe this is a little biased growing up in New England, but Dung Kings definitely got me. So watching Ben Affleck and especially Tom Brady was brought a lot of nostalgia.
That's awesome. And then last, Jen Bakos, senior strategist here on Team Strategy. What was your favorite ad?
I'm going to echo Andy and say that I loved the Dunkin' Donuts ad. It pulled so many funny things together. I love the actors in it, and I love some of the references that were made. And it was just fun, and it caught my attention.
That is great. And I will say for me, and I'm going to make myself only say one because we're all going to come back and talk about the other ones we wish we could add to the list. I'm going to go with the Lionel Messi Michelob Ultra ad. And maybe that's because I'm more of a European football fan than I am an American football fan. But I also love the nod to Ted Lasso, which, is like, I think one of the greatest shows ever made. So that was fantastic. So let's go back and just talk a little bit more. And I want to hear more from you, Maritza, on the ad that you selected, because there wasn't a ton of emotional ads, it seemed like. What do you think?
Yeah, I think this year's ads, they went back to almost like tried and true humor, not as many nostalgia, and also not as many as in previous years, the past 2 or 3 years, where we've had a lot of like statement, like either political statements or social responsibility statements or diversity, equity, and inclusion statements kind of coming through in the messaging. So I think that this was a little bit more on the lighthearted aspects of the of Super Bowl ads. So that one in particular stood out to me because it didn't follow the like highly humorous. It's like, are you going to get the punchline or the joke? It was a story. And I am a big fan of stories. I think humans in general are big fans of stories. And I think we could all relate to that. You have a dream, and are people around you going to encourage that dream or not? And I just literally, like, I was sitting there watching it and I got teary-eyed because I see my boys and I know they have dreams. And how do we encourage those dreams, and how do we put them in environments that are positive so that they can fulfill those dreams? So that's why it touched me so much.
Yeah. What for the rest of you, the rest of us, like, what was your take in terms of like the thematically were where the other emotion came through, or was it very limited from your perspectives?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. I was mentioning before we came on camera, I think like the overwhelming amount of celebrity endorsement. I think a lot of times it was kind of plugged in out of context of the rest of the story. So I found that a lot, that it was, to that point of kind of getting away from the emotional tugging at the heartstrings. It did seem like there was a lot of just like, hey, look at this flashy ad we put together and look who we got in there, even if any other celebrity could have been subbed in for them in that particular role. So I think the times that worked well, or I appreciated it more, was when the celebrity was either pulled in and used, for instance, like Beyonce's, doing and dropping new music, where there was something kind of exterior to the ad going on as well. I think Bud Light did a great job with that as well, with the genie. And then they immediately came back, and in the crowd shot, the genie and Post Malone were sitting there in the box. I thought that was really cool. So those types of things that had a little bit more context and felt like it was planned, and it was good that there was the celebrity there. But yeah, to that point, there wasn't a ton of emotion or really strong statement pieces, I didn't think.
I think that's why I did love the Dunkin' Donuts one so much, because there was context for Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, and so it was funny because of that. And I agree with you, when they just show faces that are known but really have no relevance, it's like a bit of a head scratcher to me. But I will say, so the couple that stood out to me, I agree with everybody that there wasn't it would seem more set on humor. And less on the touching, which I always love. I mean, the funny ones are great, but I also always love the really touching ones. But the couple that stood out to me, the Dove ads are always great. They always get me crying. They had the one about the girls, like sports confidence. And so that one was up there, like sort of toward the beginning, I think. And I just like love that whole series of ads. And I think it sort of like stops you in your tracks, because it's very it is emotional. And then the other one that stood out to me, which I don't know if you'd call it emotional, but it was sort of like were the Tesla ads, or the anti-Tesla ads, I should say, that were kind of like a left turn from the rest of the vibe, I'd say. So
Those
yeah,
really did stand out.
They definitely did. And I don't know if that was like a read. I don't know if that's the mood for that kind of message, but I mean, it got a lot of attention, I would think.
Yeah, I remember they had one last year.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yes, they had one.
Okay.
One this year they had two different ads, anti-Tesla, and last year it was one. It was the same financier again about it, but certainly, because it does stand out. It doesn't get lost in all the entertaining ads and things like that. But I thought, like, overall, some years seem like way more political or way more social consciousness raising. And like that was totally not there this year. Like it was really about how many A-list celebrities can you stick into an ad. And I'm not super like pop culture aware, like, but then I kept thinking like, wow, these are all like celebrities of my generation. Like, I'm over 50. Like how many, and I don't have the stats for like who watches the Super Bowl, but I thought it was really interesting the amount of pop culture that was related to me.
Inserted,
like,
yeah.
Am I the target audience for this? But perhaps.
I think that's what the buying power is, right? So, right. I mean, that Arnold and Danny DeVito one with that twins reference is so old. I think I saw that movie when I was a kid.
Yeah, it did make me think through like the structure of the game too. If there's more, younger people typically more at a party or not necessarily paying attention to ads, that type of thing. I was also thinking, Maritza, you mentioned your kids, and we have some young kids ourselves. So we're leaving at halftime and coming home. So in some ways we like miss the right after half ads, but then are actually very tuned in to the later half of the ads. So thinking through like kind of the different behavioral timelines through the game and when different ads show up was kind of interesting from that perspective.
Yeah, so I know we were talking a little bit about the investment side of this, but in the green room of doing a Zoom recording. And Maritza, you were talking about that it's the $7 million amount is actually like the floor for these guys.
Starting.
So yeah. So what do you learn about the dollars?
It's a big chunk of money, even for a big brand. For a 30-second ad during their prime time, it's actually double that. So that's 14 million. And then the production of that ad can be on average 8 million. At a celebrity with a big name like a J-Lo or an Arnold, how much is that going to be? So they're dropping a good 30-40 million dollars on these ads. Is it worth it? And I think Andy also was saying that's like, would we recommend this to our clients?
Yeah.
Well, so 123.4 million viewers of the Super Bowl. Now, some people go to the bathroom and, refill their plate during the commercials, and others do that when the game is on and watch the commercials. So even if you call it 100 million viewers for a $30 million investment, I mean, how does that work in PPC world, Andy, in
That's
terms
an
of
interesting
cost per view or cost per
Yeah,
per eyeball.
interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably not super competitive. And then on top of that, you have the challenge of not really being able to measure the outcomes super easily. Especially this year, I noticed there was not as heavy reliance on specific URLs in ads. There was a few QR codes here and there, but I think there was a lot of just assuming that the brand name is big enough that people are just going to be searching for it, or maybe even buying it not online. So you kind of have those issues of, one, it's super expensive, on like a cost per view basis, but then on top of that, you're hoping that you get some good brand equity coming out of it, but you can't really necessarily measure that these specific purchases came from Super Bowl. I saw a few different articles attempting to do some level of that just through like high level traffic analyses of when the ad ran, how many people were searching that particular company. But it does seem like it's a tough call to make, or a little bit of a risk to make. So it's going to be an interesting analysis in those boardrooms.
For sure.
Sorry, Jennifer. I always think about like getting in somebody's consideration set, and that's so hard to measure, but I think it's such an important like first step, particularly when you're like, you're an unknown product. And one of the commercials that I thought about, sort of like, how do you measure, but like, are they sort of like getting into people's consciousness, was Poppy, that soda. I think it was an ad, and it was like in the second half, and I've seen like, I sort of heard or seen a little bit about Poppy, but it was a straight up like, this is what we are. This is like, it really just like explained who they are, what they do, like what they're about, like, why you should drink it, assigned a bit of like value to it. And I'd be curious, like somebody like them, that I think the brand recognition is probably somewhat low and trying to break into like a very, very competitive space. Now it's sort of in my brain, and I'm like, I might try that. Like it kind of convinced me. It was like the new soda. So I'd be curious for something like that, where it's maybe just trying to change behaviors a little bit. How much?
So interesting, Jennifer, that you say that, because the consideration stage, you don't reap the rewards until later.
Right. Yeah.
But next time you're in the grocery store, or when you're on Thrive Market, or when you're doing your normal shopping, it's like, what was the name of that thing?
Right.
The fact that you would even consider it and have an awareness that it exists, maybe it is a gamble, and maybe it is something that pays off. So that's a really interesting observation on, maybe these are just more awareness or consideration campaigns for the newer brands, but then for the stalwarts, for the ones that we've, the Budweisers of the world, that those are more, we're making a statement because we're here, because we're big and we can afford it, like that. So maybe there are different reasons why in the boardroom they would say yes to these expenses.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a soda drinker, and so is my husband, and it's not our best habit. The whole pitch was sort of like, this is the way your kids are going to think about soda, like when they get older. It's going to be a totally different game, and it intrigued me.
Yeah. I think from an awareness perspective, that they specifically called out the long game there, right? They said, this is how our children will think when they're drinking soda. So
Yeah, it was
I
it
guess
was
to
like
that
really well
point.
done. Yeah.
That was smart of them because, they are planting a seed to change behavior in the future.
Hmm.
Along the same lines, the ad and it took me a second to understand what was going on in the ad, but at the end I was like, that was good advertising. It was the Jesus commercial on
Oh,
washing
that
feet.
stop the hate or something, or the feet washing.
It was the
Yeah.
feet
Yeah.
washing. And the reason why I think it was an effective ad, one, I am um, not a
Agnostic.
religious person at all, and of not a Christian faith. So maybe that's why I was a little slow on what is this ad, but I found it really compelling because there was such diversity, and it was like my husband was like, he's like, oh, and now it's a Muslim person, and it's like it looks like a homeless person, and it held our attention because we were like, what is going on with this ad? And then it has this powerful message at the end. So regardless of belief system, from an advertising perspective, it told a story very, very well, and that stood out to
That's
me.
interesting, and it's good to hear your perspective from a non-Christian view, because I immediately knew what it was, but I was like, wow, they're doing this. So that was interesting, and then where it took it, and it wasn't just like your normal black and white, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
this person that, but it was all different types of people, ages, economic status, gender, the sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
religion. Like it touched all of the different barriers that humans put between us, right? Because you're in that category, I'm in this category, and all that stuff. And it kind of took that story in a very, very positive way. It was powerful.
I think they had those
Yeah.
ads for the first time last year, and I think it was sort of the same reaction. And I would encourage folks to check them out because
Was
the
Great.
ad the ad is just just
from
the cover, I would say.
from the concept of like the awareness play, I thought that was interesting too. Like I wasn't clear on what the CTA was, or kind of like what are we advertising? Like I assume it's not Christianity broadly, or what organization that would necessarily be. But so it's interesting. I agree. I think it was a really powerful imagery, but maybe that's like the ultimate awareness play. It's like what are we
What
trying to
is
get
this?
done here with
Yeah.
this ad?
Yeah, and I'm sure they're trying to drive traffic to the website.
There you
And
go. I
A-
can't say that I know what
and I wouldn't.
website it is,
did you
or
go to the
what it is.
website?
No,
Oh,
like I had no interest in that, but I thought like that's a cool message. Like it's basically like we help each other. Like I liked the underlying feel goodness. I wasn't gonna follow the website, but along the same lines, like sort of reputational type ads. Um, Temu,
Ooh, yeah.
which I always
yeah.
thought was Timu. Now I remember, and I think we're all probably of the ilk that we remember when Amazon became a thing and would run Super Bowl ads. Like they don't even advertise
They
anymore.
don't
I mean
need
they
to
do.
advertise.
They don't advertise in the Super Bowl. But I was like, wow, this company has bought so many ads during the Super Bowl. And anyone who uses junk on their mobile phone like I do, whether it's games or social media or whatever, you get Temu ads all the time. And it's often a discussion in our house with our teenagers like, well, so and so ordered and it was the cheapest, knockoff Lego set. Everything's knockoff, everything is Chinese, everything is cheap. But there's also like, I don't trust it. I'm not ordering. I'm not giving them credit card information. And there's all this underlying. And then they do this series of Super Bowl ads. So, like, what do you guys think? Did it make you? My husband literally said, he's like, well, that sort of validates them as a real company in my mind. Like, somehow
It
now he's
does.
going
I
to
think
trust
that's
shopping for them.
That's an interesting observation, and maybe that's all they were trying to do is debunk whatever resistance people had to trusting them in the first place, because it's too good to be true. Everything is junk. I agree with all that. I've never bought a thing from them, nor will I. However, they dominated whatever remnant space was in the
Mhm.
Super Bowl because they kept running it over and over and over again. I see it on social media. I don't play games, but I do see it all over social media. And I'm just like, I'm so sick of it. But I get it. I'm like, good for them because they were put, you know how proximity is power. So like, who were you up against? They were against Oreo, Dunkin' Donuts, like big legitimate brands that are spending good money. And I'm like, well, maybe the government from China is giving them money. Who knows where they got all the money to be able to advertise so much during the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting. So I feel like I didn't find it very effective, or was kind of confused at to like, I'm not really even sure what story you're trying to tell here. There's prices flashing. And I feel like outside of that, I know that it's typically a discount marketplace, but I wasn't like finding the products and then figuring out, oh, that's a cheap or an expensive price. And then the messaging of shop like a billionaire, it really just, I didn't really get like, what is this product, or like, what are you trying to get me to understand? But maybe it's literally that, just put your brand name against, I guess if you have enough money to buy 3 Super Bowl ads, you can't be that much of a fly-by-night operation.
Or you got some sugar daddy behind you to pay for it.
One of the other ones that I really thought was interesting, and it was like sort of a brand that we all know, but sort of like was a twist on making you think again about how to like putting it back into your consideration set, perhaps in a slightly different way, was the I think it was a Hellman's mayonnaise ad, and it was Kate McKinnon, who I'll watch her all day long. Like, she's amazing, but I thought I was sort of like, laughing along or whatever. But then the tagline was like, make taste, not waste. And it sort of got at this idea of like, this is how you refresh leftovers, and kind of just this alternative, or not alternative, but like just sort of a new way to think about like how you use mayonnaise. I mean, I think obviously we all know we cook with it or make recipes, but it's sort of like refreshed in your mind.
Good.
And I thought it caught your attention, and then had a pretty catchy tagline and made me think about it like, okay, I never thought about sort of like refreshing my leftovers
that's a really good idea.
So that was
and like it plays on that sustainability thing about like less waste, which is, I think, where people's choices are going in, from an environmental impact or carbon footprint, all that stuff, but also just in like, okay, well, maybe you can revive something in your fridge. But what a smart thing to do, to say like, there are more uses to mayonnaise than you thought there were.
Yeah, just sort of like, I bet you never thought about it this way before. And it caught, like, having that celebrity did catch my attention because it was a funny ad.
And cats too. So
I love the cats. And because I was like wanting to like read Taylor Swift into everything, and it just wasn't there. No one did it. I was like, oh, the cat thing. I had a thought. It's totally gone now. But like, one thing I noticed that was missing, there's no Coke or Pepsi more that sometimes you get during other things. But the other thing that was missing, so I was like trying to see, I was so curious if like there would be any nods to the whole Taylor Swift Kelsey thing. There were, so shifting gears a little bit away from what we saw on broadcast TV, there's all these ads that get put out on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube and things around the Super Bowl, and they tag themselves as Super Bowl ads and this and that. They don't buy TV time, but they are playing into the fact that like, well, here we are having a whole discussion around Super Bowl ads. And so one of the ads I got served up a couple days before the Super Bowl, and I thought for sure it was going to be on broadcast TV because that's how well it was played, right? And it's gotten some press. And here's the thing, it's like I couldn't tell you if it was for Cetaphil or Noxzema or like some face, like the brand didn't stay with me, but the ad was a whole story about dad and teenage daughter reconnecting through the fact that she was into Taylor Swift and kept paying attention when she would be shown on the TV, and he was a Chiefs fan. They're wearing red shirts. Nothing says Chiefs, nothing says 87, nothing says Kelsey, nothing says Swift, but the daughter gets a jersey handed to her, number 13. Like, it was completely a Taylor Swift ad without it being
overt.
Overt. And also not not on the national broadcast.
Mm. I know that some of the Super Bowl ads obviously have been taking the long approach and teasing pieces of their ad up leading up to the Super Bowl. So they are playing that where, hey, instead of doing one shot, we'll get 10 shots, 20 shots, 30 shots leading up to it and kind of leaking little pieces to it. So I know Dunkin' Donuts did that extremely well, leading up to the full blown, Showtime Super Bowl ad to get more
Right.
bang, I think, for the investment.
Yeah, I like that, where kind of almost like a multimedia approach. I think they did that with CeraVe, with Michael Cera too. They had some like fake paparazzi shots of him carrying CeraVe weeks before or leading up to it. I thought that was kind of interesting. Probably, as we talk about investment, probably the best approach that different companies could take is that, like, hey, we know we're investing this much in this one particular spot, but how do we get enough buzz both before and after? And I'm sure we'll be seeing, that particular ad or a lot of these kind of over and over and over again. So trying to kind of expand that out and make enough use of it.
And monetize it a little bit more than just one shot.
Definitely.
That CeraVe ad was, I made a note that I thought it was funny and it definitely caught my attention, but I'm so curious about this strategy. It just seems like such a disconnect between the sort of like story and the celebrity and like face cream. I don't know.
I don't know, but Jen, I know, so, brands that like can capitalize on Super Bowl stuff and not buy broadcast ads, like the local pizza company and pizza. Well, they're not just local and pizza. So because Jen actually introduced me to their marketing, she said, you have to subscribe because it's so funny. So they had this thing, like if you would text them rigged, #rigged, within 1 minute of Kelsey getting the ball, you get like, so we won pizza, like all of us in my family won pizza. So that was brilliant. And then after the CeraVe ad, like they timed it after the CeraVe ad, they sent out one of their email marketing pieces was saying like and now like something like hold on while we go buy some CeraVe or something. I mean, like I couldn't even tell you like what the message was exactly, but the playing like sort of, and I think for all of us here, I don't believe any of us are actually working with those brands who are buying and putting in $30 million into an ad strategy for the Super Bowl, but we're working with clients who want to somehow get their unfair share of that exposure. And I think And Pizza like figured out how to leverage what's happening in real time in the Super Bowl for building brand engagement and buzz, which I thought was really cool. Do you guys know, did anyone else do that?
Well, to that point, Oreo, when we had that outage and they immediately started firing not text messages, Twitter messages years ago. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was one of the first times where we saw that it was the timing in real time responding or reacting to something that was happening in the game or something that was happening on TV. And I think since then, obviously, many brands have done it as well.
It's interesting to note too, that's kind of like one of the advantages one of these smaller brands can have, that even if you're Oreo, I feel like there are a few brands that are doing that now, doing much better with real time and even sometimes getting a little bit controversial with other brands and things like that. But ultimately, you would think that for these very large brands, you can't really do that because there's so many chains of approval to run everything through. So yeah, a lot of the smaller brands that we're typically working with, I feel like that's a great strategy. It's, kind of glom on, work off of, one of the big cultural zeitgeist kind of commercials and, see how you can make it your own and quickly.
One other ad we haven't talked about, but it made me laugh. And actually, so I had my list from the night of that I wrote down what made me laugh. I went back and watched a bunch of them, and this one made me laugh again. So it's a double whammy. The E-Trade ad with the pickleball babies, because it's the line that says the end, thanks for coming to our clinic. The first one's free.
That's
Like they
the
were
funniest
just
part.
trash talking like their opponents. I think that was hilarious.
And
That's my favorite.
they did even say, like, you need to work on your trash talking, because they weren't just like, oh, we don't have to worry about it. We got to E-Trade. And I thought that was that was clever in using pickleball, the fastest growing sport, right?
Mhm.
And then using the multi-generation, like, you guys are oldies, we're the young generation, and just kind of playing off of that.
Was that a refresh of the babies too? I don't remember seeing that in, years, seeing the babies tied to E-Trade. So it's kind of cool to see that coming back.
I didn't even know that was
Twist.
a prior
I didn't know it was
iteration
a
for
prior.
them.
I
That's
know
awesome.
There was
I
like
know
one
ads have
specific
used babies,
baby
but I don't remember
that I'm
each baby.
remembering for like 10 years ago or something. And then so I don't know if they've done a little bit of it here and there, or if this is like completely a kind of harkening back to an older ad.
Yeah, I think they've been running some fairly recently where he's at he's giving a toast at a wedding. He's like a baby, but he's like the dad. He's like who's single and ready to mingle, and it's like that little baby boy. It's just, and he's like in a tuxedo or whatever. I mean, they are funny.
And then Pringles had Chris Pratt as the Pringles guy, and I thought that made my husband chuckle, which is like a pretty high bar. So I thought that was funny.
Yeah, that don't you look like the Pringles guy? Post it. Or what did you say? After she took a picture of him.
I'm not sure, but it like by the end of the commercial, you're like, yeah, he does look like the Pringles guy. So
another one I thought
funny.
was interesting was the Reese's dropping the caramel cups, because it was kind of like that in between where it's the big brand just showing up because they can afford it and they're out there, versus building awareness around a new product. I thought that was like really, really effective, and it didn't have any celebrities, which was great. But yeah, kind of.
And
Doritos did that too.
Who?
Doritos.
Is that the dynamite one? The dinamita?
Yeah,
I thought that was hilarious, but it was also culturally relevant to me because I'm like, I know those people in my family. The two older women, very powerful matriarchs, and just like I know those aunties, I know those grandmas that are just sharp as a whip, and they're like, you are not getting away with this. So they are fierce. I thought it was funny.
The other one that was like, I feel like all over the place afterward, I've seen it several times. I've seen it's like a series, is the apartments.com ones with the guy from
The Fly. That's the only thing I can remember.
Yeah. It was curious. Like they were like slightly odd, but caught your attention. Definitely spoke to like sort of like what their value prop or whatever they're offering, but still kind of kooky. And then I've seen quite a few other iterations of the ad since. So it's definitely like, that's one of those brands that you're like, may not have really heard of it or may not have been in your brain before. I think of like GoDaddy a lot, like years and years ago. I feel like they introduced themselves during the Super Bowl, and I don't know if this might kind of follow suit, where it's sort of now everyone knows what GoDaddy is. And anyway, I thought theirs was like an interesting placement and tactic as well.
I didn't like their ads at all, but they made it, right? Like, I remember it. I remember how I didn't connect with it. Are they related to the homes.com one? Do you know if that's the
they
same?
are.
Yeah, so all of those, I was just like, oh man.
And they had a lot of them.
Yeah, and we do your home work. I'm like, oh boy. So it was just I did not connect with it whatsoever, but I'm like, you did it. You made a Super Bowl ad.
I like the format of like multiple different spots kind of telling different pieces of the story throughout the game. Though I'm curious to what extent, as you're watching it in game, if you kind of pick up one and, talking to somebody and miss the other one, if it kind of loses effectiveness by you kind of need all three pieces or all four pieces to kind of get through the full storyline.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, if they're compelling enough I know I've been at Super Bowl parties where as soon as the action stop and they go to commercial, that's when everyone's like, shh, okay, and starts paying attention just because you want to see them. And I think if you can make that series compelling enough, people will sort of wait for it and watch. I don't know if they were so much like serial as much as just several different options. But yeah, I'm with you that I didn't like love them, but they stuck in my mind because I noticed the presence, I guess.
Yeah.
So bottom line it for me. Let's go around. How was this year? Good, bad, boring? Anything you missed or wished you'd seen?
I think I had more that I liked than I didn't like. Now, I didn't love everything. I didn't agree with it. I'm not in their market, that kind of stuff. But from a marketer or from an advertiser or brand strategist perspective, I thought that they leaned on the tried and true formulas. They obviously leveraged celebrities. They pulled on some nostalgia and heartstring stuff lightly. They stayed away from politics, even though this is an election year. So some of that stuff were a little bit more of a safe, tried and true play. They leaned heavy on humor, and for the most part, they landed on the right humor. I think for the most part, the crowd, at least in the room I was in, was laughing, and it was a multi-generational group of diverse backgrounds. And we were laughing. We were laughing out loud. And I think the feel good commercials, they got it. They nailed it. I think Nerds did that fairly well. And, overall, I'd give this year a thumbs up on the Super Bowl ads. There were definitely some duds. And we've all mentioned a few of those. There were definitely some that you're like, you just missed it, dude. Who wrote that? Who signed off on that? But for me, I'm going to give it a thumbs up for this year.
Great. Andy, what about you?
Yeah, I think I largely agree with Maritza. I think I didn't necessarily see as many standouts as in previous years. Like, I went back for preparing for this conversation, kind of rewatched a lot of them. And there's a lot that, is kind of like, I guess I saw that in real time and didn't really remember it or it didn't impact me at all. But I didn't see a ton of duds either. Like, I think it was kind of a lot of safe plays, like you said, kind of going back to humor, no giant swings, just a lot of humor and getting the celebrity in there for, an okay ad.
Jen, what about you?
Yeah, same. I thought overall, I was like, these are pretty good. I've definitely had years where I was like, man, I haven't seen too many that I love. I missed some of the sort of like more like the heartstring stuff. I think, I love a funny ad, but I think those tend to stick with me. But overall, yeah, I think they were all enjoyable to watch, and there were a lot of them, like a lot of fresh content every time I went to commercial. So
That's great. I think you all summarized it very well. I don't have anything of substance to add to that. It was better than some recent years, but I think I was maybe hoping for, expecting a little bit more in the social justice political space, especially this election season. I think my favorite Super Bowl ad of all times is for 84 Lumber. And I don't know who makes decisions for buying lumber, but that ad, it's years ago now, but it was powerful, and it was when immigration was all in the forefront of political discourse, and they put a stake in the ground and took a position as a brand, and I thought it was so powerful and such an opportunity, and I feel like you didn't see any of that. We saw none of those sort of making statements, and it was all just meant to be feel good kind of lightheartedness, and which is great. It was entertaining for sure. So, but it wasn't quite the juiciness that maybe it could have been.
I know the year we had
controversial kind of stuff.
That's right. Maybe that's what it is. It's pity.
It's the calm before the storm.
Yes, that's true. I'm sure we have a lot of political discourse coming, and so we'll have to, convene this group again, maybe when it is political ad season, and we can, put on our Monday morning quarterback hats for ads from a different context. But
So we have an honorable mention of Google Pixel 8 ad. When we said there were a lot of the nostalgia or the pulling at the heartstrings missing, they got that one. I think they nailed it, and they followed the story of this couple from when they met to when they had a baby and their family and all that stuff. And how many of us hate blurry pictures of something super important that happened, that we were able to capture it. I think they did a great job of bringing into focus the blurry, and it was just like you were right behind the camera. They did an excellent job of that ad.
Also, let me ask, because I thought that was a really great ad too, and I thought it really demonstrated the value of the product. But I was thinking that it was sort of an assistant sort of thing for people who couldn't
me too.
Yeah.
who had visual
Oh.
impairment. So,
And I thought about a few
Yeah.
friends of ours who are legally blind, and I said this would be amazing. And in our conversation, somebody said this would be perfect for somebody who is visually
Yeah.
impaired.
yeah, that's what I took from it. And I just loved the whole sort of value prop of telling there's two people here, two faces. And then to finish up with the three was such a beautiful way to
Mhm.
kind of just bring that whole thing around. Yeah, that was
Really
a good
well
one.
done.
I agree, and I wrote it down. It was the thing I wrote down on second page, which is why I missed it earlier. It was so late in the game. It was literally the last one I wrote down. It was so late in the broadcast of the Super Bowl, and I agree. It was the storytelling, the humanity, but the assisted device nature of it. And I was just having a conversation with another marketer friend who is really focused on accessibility and building websites for visual impairment. It's on trend in the sense of technology is now catching up and making things from an equity perspective more accessible to everybody in the community. So it sort of fits into this. I'm hearing it in multiple places, but to see a phone kind of get it right. And Rachel, like you, my father-in-law is visually impaired. This would be fantastic. So good for Google for that,
We're focusing on that and
reminding us.
Mhm.
Thanks for introducing your name to us, Google.
Yes, we don't see you 75 ways in our day. I want to thank you, each of you, for being here. This is a lot of fun, and apologies for the technical difficulties. We were supposed to have this going live on Facebook so that we can get some more engagement from folks in terms of what their ads were and get. But it's okay. It's all happened in the past anyway, so this will just get posted after the fact.